All right, guys. So yesterday there was a Charlie Kirk Memorial service that I think a couple 100,000 people showed up to. It was held in this giant football stadium. You had a bunch of his ideological allies who were giving speeches, and it really turned into much more of a right-wing political rally, a sort of call for vengeance than an actual memorial service. So I want to show you some of the most insane clips from this event. Then we also have some updates on the assassination itself, some of the remaining unanswered questions in regards to the assassination, as Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, basically gives weight to some of the conspiracies, valid or not, surrounding Charlie Kirk's death. So we'll get to that. And then we're going to finish off with some updates on Jimmy Kimmel, as Donald Trump is basically coming out and outright saying that if you're mean to him, then that no longer counts as free speech, as he's directing his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to go after his political opponents. So lots to get to here. Remember to like, comment, subscribe to support the channel. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. And yeah, let's go ahead and start with this this little demonic figure, Stephen Miller here, as he basically delivers a speech that would not be out of place had it been given in the 1930s by Joseph Goebbels. Let's go ahead and jump into this.
The storm whispers to the warrior that you cannot withstand my strength. And the warrior whispers back, I am the storm. Erica is the storm. We are the storm. And our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our determination, our resolve, our passion. Our lineage and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. Our ancestors built the cities. They produced the art and architecture. They built the industry. Erica stands on the shoulders of thousands of years of warriors, of women who raised up families, raised up city, raised up industry, raised up civilization, who pulled us out of the caves and the darkness into the light. The light will defeat the dark. We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us. Because we stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And to those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness, you are jealousy, you are envy, you are hatred. You are nothing. You can build nothing. You can produce nothing. You can create nothing. We are the ones who build. We are the ones who create. We are the ones who lift up humanity. You thought you could kill Charlie Kirk? You have made him immortal. You have immortalized Charlie Kirk.
Okay, so first off, let's just contextualize what we're actually talking about here, what this supposed service is supposed to be about. Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck while he was at a Turning Points USA event in Utah by allegedly, based on what we know so far, a lone person, this guy Tyler Robinson, who based on his political beliefs, we know very little of, right? We know that he was reportedly pro-LGBTQ, that he had some sort of a trans roommate allegedly, and he said that Charlie Kirk was filled with hatred. Outside of that, we know very little about his politics. There's certainly no evidence whatsoever that he was part of some broader coalition or group or something like that ideologically. And he's talking about this assassination, right? Given what we know, and he's talking about it as a civilizational clash, right? Look at the rhetoric that he's using. Again, it's not an exaggeration to say that this is Nazi-like rhetoric. If you don't believe me, then go ahead and read up here, as pointed out by Jim, the literal text, you can pause it if you want, from The Storm is Coming by Joseph Goebbels in 1932, and tell me that there are not similarities here. When Stephen Miller uses rhetoric like this is a battle between the light and the darkness, it's almost as if Benjamin Netanyahu is giving this kind of a speech, right? Typical fascist rhetoric, hearkening back to a mythic golden era, a golden past, saying that our lineage of Americans goes back to Rome and goes back to ancient Greece. I mean, what are we talking about here, right? Talking about raising up an army, and you have awoken this warrior class that's going to rise up and defeat and to vanquish our enemies, right? And he's talking about this in the context of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He's trying to make Charlie Kirk, and they are trying to make Charlie Kirk a martyr for their political agenda, for their political project, and to expand this kind of into an opportunity for a massive authoritarian power grab. That's what this is. Right? So absolute, utter, unabashed fascist rhetoric there. from Stephen Miller. I mean, read from this poem up here. So our dead comrade Horst Wessel wrote, "We were fulfilling his prophecy. The others may lie, slander, and pour their scorn on us. Their political days are numbered. They promise you, workers, citizens, and creative Germans, the Reich of freedom and beauty and dignity. Rise up and storm, break loose. You are the witnesses, the builders, right? The will bearers." I mean, this is almost like a ChatGPT remake of this Joseph Goebbels speech. So there's Stephen Miller to start off. We also had Jack Pacific, I believe is how you pronounce his name, who was framing this in a much more aggressively religious light. Let's go ahead and watch this.
Are you ready to continue the mission? Are you ready to fight back? And are you ready to put on the full armor of God and face the evil in high places and the spiritual warfare before us? Then put on the full armor of God. Do it now. Now is the time. This is the place. This is the turning point for Charlie.
So framing this as a sort of religious battle, I mean, again, even as there's no indication whatsoever that Charlie was killed for anything having to do with his religion as a Christian in any way, shape, or form. There's no indication that that's the case. But he's saying, put on your armor of God, right? Do it now. This is the turning point. The turning point for what? Like, what are you going to battle for? Who are you going to battle against? Unless it's just some like amorphous, vague definition of your political enemies, because that's what it seems like, right? Now we continue. We also had Donald Trump himself sort of self-admittedly contradicting what he says Charlie actually believed in. This was an amazing clip here. Let's go ahead and watch.
In that private moment on his dying day, we find everything we need to know about who Charlie Kirk truly was. He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great, great purpose. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica. But now Erica can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent.
So, okay, first off, like, this is our president. Like, actually, you can't even... And this reminds me of the clip we saw from a couple of days ago where he was outside on the White House lawn and somebody asked him, I mean, I think it was only like a day or two after Charlie was killed, and they basically said, "How are you holding up?" right, in the aftermath of this? And he said, "Oh, I'm doing great. By the way, look at the ballroom over there. Isn't that fantastic? We're finally building it," right? Trump clearly, I think any reasonable person could see, doesn't really give a shit about Charlie Kirk. And so here you have another example of that, where he's saying, yeah, here's what Charlie believed in. He's saying this at his memorial service, right? Here's what Charlie believed in. I believe in the opposite, right? I actually think we should drive hate throughout the country. I think we should hate our political opponents. I don't want what's best for everyone. I only want what's best for my allies. He's just saying it out loud. Now, this was especially contrasted when you got to the wife of Charlie Kirk, Erica here, when she gave her portion of the speech, where she straight up outright forgave the shooter of Charlie Kirk, right? And said, this is what Jesus would have done, and so this is what I'm going to do. And she used that famous, biblical quote of, "They know not what they do," whatever. And she forgave the assassin, right? And then she goes on to basically deliver the complete polar opposite of what Donald Trump just said there.
I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do. The answer to hate is not hate. The answer we know from the gospel is love, and always love. Love for our enemies and love for those who persecute us.
Okay, so honestly, you know what? Respect for her saying that, right? I mean, you have all of these other guys who are lining up to call for vengeance, to call for some sort of like a fucking holy war. And here you have the person who presumably is the most heavily impacted by this. I mean, Charlie had kids, right? Obviously she's the wife. Probably the person who's most, impacted by this over anybody else in the world. And she's saying she forgives the shooter, and also we need to push love over hate. So contrast that to the fucking president. I mean, that's wild, right? Now, we move on from that sort of event there that clearly was weaponized by, people surrounding Trump and Trump himself to sort of, again, use the Charlie Kirk assassination to further an authoritarian power grab for themselves. Now, moving on to the details of the assassination itself. So Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, who has been absolutely fumbling every single aspect of the response to Charlie Kirk's assassination, he puts out this very bizarre, almost like sort of cryptic message on Twitter where, again, he's sort of validating a lot of the conspiracy theories that have been floating around. And you could almost, if you went into this tweet here without believing any conspiracy theories, you would almost come out the other side more likely to believe, okay, wait, something actually is going on here, because why is the head of the FBI talking about this? So here's what he said. He said, as the director of the FBI, I am committed to ensuring the investigation into Kirk's assassination is thorough and exhaustive, pursuing every lead to its conclusion. The full weight of America's law enforcement agencies are actively following the evidence that has emerged, but our efforts extend beyond initial findings. We are examining every facet of the assassination. We are meticulously investigating theories and questions, including the location from where the shot was taken. So one of the theories that's been floating around, and part of the justification for this is, and I'm no gun expert, so don't take my word for it, but, some people are saying with the weapon that was used, it doesn't make sense that there wasn't an exit wound, and we'll get to more of that here in a second, but that doesn't really make sense. And also it kind of looks like the front where the blood was pouring out, that kind of looks more like an exit wound. And so maybe there was a different shooter who took the shot from a different angle, right? So he says, we're investigating whether or not that's a possibility. I mean, are you just sort of floating that out there into the ether, or is this something that you actually believe could be the case? That Tyler was not the one who took the shot direct on from, the elevated building? You're saying there could be another angle. But he continues. He says they're also looking into the possibility of accomplices. Okay. He says the text message confession and related conversations, right? And I'll show you as a reminder here in a second, the text messages themselves, because when I was initially reading through it, I was just trying to get through the entirety of the charging doc. But when you read through the text, they are kind of weird for a number of different reasons, but we'll get to that. He says they're also looking through the Discord chats, the angle of the shot, the bullet impact, how the weapon was transported, the hand gestures that were observed as potential signals near Charlie at the time of his assassination, and visitors to the alleged shooter's residence in the hours and days leading up to September 10th, 2025. So there's an easy explanation here that maybe this is just because Kash Patel is sort of like a podcast bro kind of guy, and if he was not the head of the FBI right now, which he shouldn't be, but if he wasn't, he would be one of the podcasters who was floating around a bunch of conspiracies. So maybe that's sort of just like how his brain works, and he forgot that he's the head of the FBI, and so he just tweeted this out. Or maybe there is some credence to some of these theories. I have no idea, but this is a bizarre thing to put out there when you don't have firm answers on any of these things, to just sort of signal to people who have a bunch of theories that, like, yeah, we're looking into it. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Who knows? So there you had that from Kash Patel. Absolutely bizarre. Now, again, the update on the bullet itself, we had this. Here from Fox News, they say, man of steel, Charlie Kirk's body reportedly stopped a bullet that would typically just go through everything, and it was an absolute miracle that nobody else was killed. So here we have the full statement from a Turning Point USA spokesperson on exactly what they're talking about here. So he says, I want to address some of the discussion about the lack of an exit wound with Charlie. I'm usually not interested in delving into most of this kind of online chatter, and I apologize that this is somewhat graphic, but in this case, the fact that there wasn't an exit wound is probably another miracle, and I just wanted people to know. So this is one of the questions that people have been having, right? Obviously, again, I'm not a gun expert, so I wouldn't know, maybe do some more research on this, or, I've seen a couple of other people who are more gun experts looking into this, and basically the thought is like, look, this was a super high-powered, high-caliber weapon that was used here. Typically, this is something that's used to like hunt elk or to hunt, potentially kill a moose or something like that. And this is a bullet that usually would just blast through basically anything that's in its way. So how was there not an exit wound when it went through soft tissue on Charlie Kirk's neck, right? That's the question that's being asked. And he says it was a miracle, essentially, is the explanation. So he spoke to the surgeon who worked on Charlie in the hospital, and he said, the surgeon, that the bullet absolutely should have gone through, which is very, very normal for a high-powered, high-velocity round. I've seen wounds from this caliber many times, and they always go through everything. This would have taken a moose or two, an elk, etc. But it didn't go through. Charlie's body stopped it. I mentioned to his doctor that there were dozens of staff, students, and special guests who were standing directly behind Charlie on the other side of the tent, and he replied it was an absolute miracle that someone else didn't get killed. His bone was so healthy, and the density was so impressive that he's like the man of steel. It should have just gone through and through. It likely would have killed those standing behind him. In the end, the coroner did find the bullet just beneath the skin. And he says, even in death, Charlie managed to save the lives of those around him. Remarkable, miraculous. So there's a couple ways to look at that. First of all, this could all just be a massive exaggeration, and this guy's hyping this up for whatever purpose. The second option is that he wants people to just accept at face value that this was a quote unquote miracle, but calling it a miracle is not an explanation, right? What are we actually talking about here? The claim is that this is a bullet and this is a gun that in a typical situation, according to his own words, could go through a moose, could go through multiple mooses, could go through an elk, and yet this bullet entered through the front of Charlie Kirk's neck, again, through soft tissue, and then was stopped by the back of his neck, is the claim here. I mean, he says his bone density was so impressive, and his bone was so healthy that it was more powerful than a full-on moose? Like, what? I'm genuinely, and I'm not even trying to push anything here. I'm not trying to make any sort of assertion or claim here, but this to me is just weird. How is that possible? Maybe it is just some sort of one-off. The bullet happened to enter it a specific way, and then it ricocheted a little bit, and then it hit his spine in some certain way that caused it to not have an exit wound or something. Absolutely 1 in a million kind of a chance. That could absolutely be the case. I don't know. I'm not even making any sort of conclusion from this, but I mean, this is, again, just bizarre. This is just one of many sort of aspects of this that I think need to be further delved into here, right? Now, again, as a reminder in terms of the text, again, the first time that I read through it, I was just trying to make it through all of the documents, and so I wasn't really trying to analyze the language that was being used here, but a lot of people have brought up some questions about this. Now, again, not making any sort of assertions here, just interesting, the way that this is all sort of happening, right? So these were the text messages that were released as a part of the charging documents against Tyler Robinson. So these are reportedly the texts that Tyler sent to his trans roommate, right, in the direct aftermath of the shooting. And so he basically admits, he says, look for the note that I left under my keyboard. And she says, what? You're joking? Because the note said, obviously, I have a chance to kill Charlie Kirk. I'm going to take it. And let's just read through just to remind ourselves of these texts a little bit. And again, could entirely be that this guy sent these texts. They're entirely his words. He might just be a weird guy. But he said, I'm still okay, my love, but I'm stuck in Orem for a little while longer. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but I gotta grab my rifle still. To be honest, I had hoped to keep this secret till I die of old age. I'm sorry to involve you. So to me, it's weird here that he clearly was trying to escape. He clearly is here saying, I wanted to keep this a secret until I was in my old age, right? I still at this point wanted to get away with it. But here I go about to divulge every single aspect of what I just did that could potentially later be uncovered by the police as a part of these text messages. So he says, I'm sorry. Then he goes down and he says they grabbed some crazy old dude, then interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town is got locked down. He says it's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering. He says, down here, I had enough of his hatred, again, explaining why he did this. Some hate can't be negotiated out. If I'm able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. Going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything about them finding it. She asks, how long have you planned this? He says, a bit over a week, I believe. I can get close to it, but there is a squad car parked right by it. I think they already swept that spot, but don't want to chance it. He says, I'm wishing I'd circle back to grab it as soon as I got to my vehicle. I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. I don't even know if it had a serial number, but it wouldn't trace to me. I worry about prints I had to leave in a bush where I changed outfits. Didn't have the ability or time to bring it with. I might have to abandon it and hope they don't find prints. How the fuck will I explain losing it to my old man? He says, remember how I was engraving bullets? The fucking messages are mostly a big meme. And then he points out the notices bulge. And if that's on Fox News, I might have a stroke. So again, who knows whether or not this guy is just a very strange person. But a lot of people, especially young people like myself, if you look at some of the language that he's using here, right? He says vehicle instead of car. He says squad car instead of a cop car. I don't think I've ever heard anybody outside of a police officer say the word squad car instead of a cop car. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some of you guys do. Let me know down in the comments if that's the case. You know, he uses terms like my drop point for my rifle. You know, he goes into explicit detail. He uses the word like my old man to refer to his dad. You know, that could be entirely innocent and normal. But he goes into explicit detail after just saying that he wanted to take this secret with him basically to his grave. He goes into explicit detail about how he did it, why he did it, how he was previously engraving the bullets, how he's been planning it for a week, how, you know, where he left his rifle, where he changed his clothes, how he planned to get away with it, right? I mean, every single aspect of this, it's almost as if it is like gift wrapped, right? Gift wrapped to the police to be able to say, checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. We got it, right? No more questions need to be asked in this circumstance. So again, let me know what you guys think about this, because I'm not insinuating, I'm not saying that these are like entirely fabricated texts. Again, they could be entirely legit, and they're going to have to prove this in court one way or another. So we will be able to find out whether or not, you know, these texts, there is something shady going on with it. But the reason why I bring this up is just because it's like, man, if the story really is just as they say exactly, and there are no real, you know, further questions or weird things going on here, the way that you have handled this has made it seem as though there is something going on. Like, it's almost as if, like, if you wanted people to believe that there is a conspiracy here, if you wanted people to disbelieve the main story, the main narrative that you were putting out, then this is how you would have handled it, right? So again, many, many, many unanswered questions that I think still need to be looked into at this point. So I'll leave that at that. Now we move on here. Final thing that I want to get to in this video, because amidst all of this, we've had the crackdown on Donald Trump's political opponents in multiple different ways. There was a mass sort of cancel culture spree in the immediate aftermath of Charlie Kirk's death, where anybody who was critical of him, you know, after he died, was fired from their job. You have people trying to, you know, kick people out of schools, etc. Full-blown cultural crackdown led by the Trump administration, pushed by the government. And one of the things that happened last week that I didn't get to cover was Jimmy Kimmel basically got pushed off of the air for an extremely mild joke that he made about Charlie Kirk. And really the joke was more so about Donald Trump not caring about Charlie Kirk, which is, I think, objectively true or subjectively true from everything that I've seen. But he made this mild joke about Charlie and about Trump's response to Charlie dying, and he got pushed off the air. Now, there's a couple different layers to this story. I'll show you about the sort of merger that the corporate merger that weighs in the background of some of the decisions that were made here. But Donald Trump and his FCC chair, Brendan Carr, who led the push to get Jimmy Kimmel taken off the air, they haven't been hiding that this was a government-led initiative explicitly to censor political speech, right? And so here's the latest clip from Donald Trump laying that out as explicitly as you possibly can.
George Papadopoulos had to pay $16 million to me because of what he said. And that's ABC. You had to pay more than that. Your network had to pay more than that. So I think it's very sad. But I think that reporting has to be at least accurate to an extent. Again, when somebody is given 97% of the stories are bad about a person, that's no longer free speech. That's no longer, that's just cheating. And they cheat. And they become really members of the Democrat National Committee. That's what.
So he openly is saying now that if you are a late night host, essentially, if you're somebody who's on TV and you are against Trump, right? If 97% of what you talk about in relation to Trump is negative coverage, then that's no longer free speech. Guys, there is no way to interpret this other than he thinks it should be punishable, either by firing or potentially in the future by arrest, for you to be critical of him. That's how he views this situation, right? This is his authoritarian instinct that's kicking in here, and he doesn't realize, or maybe he doesn't care at this point, that you're kind of not supposed to say the quiet part out loud in that regard, right? The narrative that Trump is supposed to be going with here, if he wants to sort of protect his you know, the narrative that they're floating here that, oh, Jimmy Kimmel was just fired for ratings, is you should be talking about that, right? You should be saying, oh, Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and all these late night hosts, they have terrible ratings. I had nothing to do with it. They're just bad at what they do. So, good luck. And then you can move on from it, right? But he's just openly admitting it. He's saying, no, Jimmy Kimmel was overwhelmingly negative in relation to me. And so I weaponized the FCC, I weaponized the government in order to push him off the air. Now, again, there is a backstory here, or sort of a couple different layers to this, that make another point that I think is critically important about this, which is that capitalism and capitalists are not going to be a bulwark against fascism. If anything, they are going to pave the road to fascism. So here from the New York Times, their headline was, how a TV merger raised the pressure on ABC to suspend Kimmel. So basically what's going on here is you have a couple different ABC affiliates, right? The people who carry ABC, right? And push it out to people's households. So you have Sinclair, you have Nexstar, and then you have this other group that I'm blanking on the name down here. It's Telegram or something like that, if I can find this graphic. Yeah, Tegna is the name of it. So you have Sinclair, you have Nexstar, and you have Tegna. Now, Nexstar is reportedly trying to merge with Tegna, right? So they're trying to do a corporate merger that as of right now goes against the FCC rules that say you can't go above a certain percentage of ownership in terms of these national media companies, right? And so this would put them over that cap. And so they need the FCC, they need Brendan Carr to remove that rule for them, essentially. So they have every incentive in the world to cozy up to the FCC right now. And so they did, right? Essentially, because they're trying to get this corporate merger through, and also I think largely because they have right-wing pro-Trump corporate ownership that's leading these companies, they said, okay, we're going to push Kimmel off the air, right? And maybe, even though we paid millions of dollars with what Trump was referencing there with George Stephanopoulos, maybe if we do this and we cozy up even more and we bend over and we do what he says, maybe he'll allow our corporate merger to go through. And this was the kind of message that was being sent by the FCC and by Brendan Carr right before they made this decision to stop showing Jimmy Kimmel, which essentially applied pressure on Disney to pull the show entirely, for now at least. And so here is the quote from Brendan Carr. He said, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct and take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. I think that it's really sort of past time a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we're going to preempt or to take it off the air. So he's literally using like mafia style language here, floating this out, directly knowing who's listening to this kind of a message to intimidate them, to scare them. Right? We can do this the easy way or the hard way. This is just mafia style tactics that we're talking about here. And this is all, by the way, brazenly illegal, what they're doing here. In fact, I think it was either earlier this year or last year with the same conservative Supreme Court that we have in place right now that ruled 9-0 in a case that essentially reaffirmed that, yes, the federal government cannot apply pressure on private corporations in order to change political speech. Right? They made that ruling. And the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter whether or not the Supreme Court ruled against this, whether or not this is brazenly illegal, because these companies see it as being more financially beneficial to themselves to not put up a fight, even if it's a fight that Disney could have won, right? Even if it's a fight that Nexstar or that ABC or whatever the case may be could have won, okay? And so they say, okay, we're just not going to put up a fight. Maybe if we do what he says this time, then he'll leave us alone for a little bit, and we can protect our shareholders, we can protect our profit margins, etc. And so this is how you pave the road to fascism. Again, capitalism and fascism, there's a reason why they are known as being intertwined like that. Now, further on that point here from More Perfect Union, they say that in 1983, there were 50 companies, it's just like 40 some odd years ago, that controlled 90% of the US media market. Now, that number has been cut by 10 down to 5, right? Divided by 10, okay? This was in 1983, 50 companies controlled 90% of the US media market. Now it's down to 5, right? And they are further trying to consolidate. And beyond that, now you have, what are we talking about? We have Twitter, We have, all of these other different companies. We have Facebook. We have, all of these other CEOs from these tech companies that are cozying up to Donald Trump. Basically, every single major CEO company, all of these media companies are bending over for Donald Trump. The ownership of these places is overwhelmingly right-wing. Now they're trying to put TikTok essentially into the hands of pro-Trump Zionist entities in this country in order to crack down on the pro-Palestine content on TikTok as a part of this deal that they've cut with China. So, I mean, overwhelmingly, the media here in the United States, the tech space here in the United States is becoming further consolidated, and it's becoming further consolidated in the hands of pro-Trump right-wing billionaires, etc. So that was that. So alarming stuff going on there. And in the meantime, we also have, final thing here, Donald Trump directly pushing his Attorney General Pam Bondi to crack down on his political opponents. So this was reportedly put out on his Truth Social, but it clearly looks like this was a text message that he was trying to send, or a DM that he was trying to send to Pam Bondi, his Attorney General. And he accidentally posted it and then deleted it on his Truth Social. So here he says, Pam, I've reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time, all talk, no action. Nothing is being done. What about Comey? What about Adam Schiff and Letitia James? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is going to be done. Then we almost put a Democrat-supported U.S. attorney in Virginia with a really bad Republican past, a woke rhino who was never going to do his job. That's why the two of the worst Dem senators pushed him so hard. He even lied to the media and said he quit and that we had no case in regards to the Letitia James case. He says, no, I fired him, and there is a great case, and many lawyers, I think is what he meant to say there, and legal pundits say so. Lindsay is a really good lawyer and likes you a lot. We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice may be served. So what is he talking about here? Well, first off, the latest on what he was referencing here was with Letitia James, right? The New York AG, who obviously went after Donald Trump for fraud, business fraud in New York, and won against him because he was guilty of massive fraud in New York City throughout his time as a real estate mogul. And so this is essentially political revenge that he's trying to wield against Letitia James. Now, he's referencing that there was a Virginia district attorney guy who was told to look into these allegations against Letitia James for something that they essentially conjured up. And he said, look, there's nothing here for me to go after her on. And in response to that, Trump essentially pushed him out of his job, right? And is trying to replace him with a loyalist who will go after people like Letitia James, who will go after Comey, who will go after people like Adam Schiff, purely just out of political revenge for what he references down here, the impeachments, the fraud case that he lost with Letitia James, etc. So here he is texting and accidentally posting on the timeline his Attorney General to go after his political opponents, right? Regardless of if there is a valid case or not. And the irony of this being, like, everything that he has been people have gone after him for, right? The impeachment, Russiagate stuff aside, but, all of the other cases that he's had to face, this is stuff that he actually did. Like, he was guilty, and he's gotten off with a lot more than he's actually been held accountable for. And then he turns around, and after accusing the left, after accusing Democrats of politically motivated attacks against him, he does exactly that and launches politically motivated attacks against his political opponents. So this is a space that we're in right now, guys. We have sort of like fascist rallies calling for vengeance in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. We have Donald Trump and Stephen Miller using this as an opportunity for some sort of an authoritarian power grab. There are still many unanswered questions about the assassination itself. And yeah, I'll do my best to keep you guys updated on all of it.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying